This episode is about competition in sports and business, marriage, life in general. We all know what it's like to win, and we like it. And we all also know what it's like to lose, and we hate that feeling. If you want insight as a follower of Jesus, or even if you're not a Christian, stick around because we're going to peel this onion and figure out how to avoid the pitfalls of negative competitiveness. It's a complicated topic, kind of like a game at the circus where you're trying to knock those little milk jugs over, and you've got this lightweight ball, and the little milk jugs are too heavy, and you can't knock them over. It's rigged because of our nature. It's internal, and it's happening in real time, and it's tied to values, systems, and emotions. Scientific studies show a direct link to overcompetitiveness and depression, anxiety, and stress. However, competitiveness can be a positive and even a necessary component. Joe Montana says, when the game is over, I just want to look at myself in the mirror, win or lose, and know that I gave it everything I had. It sounds like Paul in 1 Corinthians 9, where he says, I don't run like someone who's running aimlessly, and I don't fight like a boxer beating at the air. He's running to win, not the kind of prize that sits on a shelf or wealth that's empty and temporary, but the kind of prize that has rewards here in this life and in the next life. We have some interesting guests to help us dig into this, Chad Carbonneau and John Sweetland, and we'll jump into those interviews here after me and Jeff catch up.
Theo Theodotos. Theodotos. Rob and Jeff and guest galore. Theodotos, sit back for more. Theodotos.
How's my friend Rob Sharp today?
Rob Sharp is good. How's Jeff?
Yeah. Jeff is tired. I know you are too. We tend to do these things when we haven't had nearly enough sleep. I'm not sure why that is a routine that we've fallen into.
I don't know. I think there just needs to be more hours in the day or something. It's hard to get everything done.
Or less day in the day, because I tend to do most of my stuff at night. Maybe that would be helpful. I don't know. I don't know how that works. I do know I'm excited about the show today. We have a good friend to both of us, Chad Carvino, on the show today, so I'm excited about that. You had a chance to sit down with Chad. Sadly, I missed that gathering. Usually there's good food at Chad's house, so I'm sorry that I missed that.
Well, yeah, we had a good time. Yeah, we kind of went over some sports related things, and it was insightful. It was good. And then we also have John Sweetland, who's part of this podcast subject matter, but unfortunately we did have some technical issues. Well, first of all, with the interview with Chad, the camera overheated, so I had a separate audio recorder. So, 25 minutes in, you lose video, but stick around because it's the conversation is good.
Sure.
And then with the meeting with John Sweetland, that was that was it was a good interview. It was a good time, but we were in a public place. We had a room kind of in the back of a restaurant, and it was pretty quiet for the most part, but because of the difference in audio and everything, yeah, we had to kind of, we're going to separate those two, the interviews in the podcast.
So you all will get to hear Chad and Rob talking with each other today. That portion will be in the show. For his discussion with John Sweetland, that we're going to make that a separate video on YouTube. You'll be able to watch the whole thing there. And that link will be in the show notes. I'll make sure it's up before you get this audio drop. So if you want to check that out, be sure and click on it. And it is really a part of this episode. But because the audio quality is pretty different than what we've got with the rest of the show, it just made sense to kind of separate it a little bit. But make sure you check that out for sure. Now, you used to work for John, is that right? Or with John?
Yeah, we for, gosh, 18 years or something like that. So
Wow.
we had plenty of conversations.
And
we
he
would
still
have
shows up when you invite him places? That's crazy.
Well, I had to pay him, But no. So yeah, we would have lunch with the guys every day, and some of those lunches would go on for 3.5, 4 hours at times. So we did more talking and spending time together than we did actually working, but it was worth it. So
Yeah.
we discussed a lot of different topics. So I and we had previously talked about kind of things along this line, competitiveness, and so this was just kind of a chance to deep dive into that with him, and so that was interesting. And Chad, both Chad and John Sweetland have, prolific backgrounds in involvement in sports and things. Um, and like I said, it goes beyond just sports. That's just the low hanging fruit. It's easy to understand competition through sports and to
Sure.
look at that and kind of break it down. So yeah, but had some good conversations. Yeah.
That's great. So before we jump into your discussion with Chad, which I think knowing Chad and just how chill he is most of the time, I think it's going to be interesting for our listeners to, especially because the last thing they will have heard by the time they hear this will have been us with Dale and Danny, which was a pretty high energy conversation happening post election. So I think a nice chill talk with Chad is probably going to be a fun change of pace for them. Um, I wanted to ask, so just silly sort of icebreaker question for you. This came up. I was watching something the other day, and this question was asked, and I was like, you know what? If I asked Rob that, I'm not sure I know what his answer would be. The question is, what is a when you were a kid, what was a comfort movie that you watched like dozens of times? Just either you put it on or every time it was on, you had to stop and watch it. And then do you have a version of that now? Like, is there a different movie that would be your comfort movie now?
That's an interesting question. I Yeah, comfort movie. I don't know if it falls in the category of comfort movie, but I did have a movie that I watched repeatedly when I was, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11 years old. It was Flash Gordon, the 80s version with the
Okay.
Queen
Queen
soundtrack.
soundtrack. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man,
You can't
just
can't beat
can't
a
get
Queen
enough of
soundtrack. Yeah.
that. So I don't know.
It's
Now
been so long since I've seen that movie. I remember the movie. I know I've watched it, and I'm sure that I've watched it more than once, but I couldn't tell you the last time I watched that movie. It's been a long time. But
yeah,
great soundtrack, yeah. Yeah.
I think
Anything like
they
that
grew
as
up
an
with it.
adult that you just anytime it's on, you're gonna sit down and watch some of it,
Um,
or you're
yeah,
having a
I mean,
rough day and you just want to chill, so you put on something that you love.
yeah, maybe 300.
Okay, some Zack Snyder. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. There's parts of movies that you just forward fast through,
Mm.
because like where it kind of drags or whatever, and you're just like, I don't want to watch that part again. But yeah, something like that. James Bond movies, or pretty much any old movie with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby in it, you know.
Yeah. 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 I
How
was
about
gonna
you?
say that's kind of when I was young. I feel like once certain movies hit TV where they were being rerun over and over again, yeah, a lot of old movies for sure. So, I mean, I've probably seen those Hope Crosby Road to pictures dozens of times each.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure I've seen most of the Jerry Lewis, Dean Martin, or just Jerry Lewis by himself. All those movies, I've probably seen those dozens of times too. Elvis movies, James Bond
Oh yeah.
movies. But as far as like a comfort thing, I would say really early on, like when they first, this is gonna paint me as being ancient. When they first had VCRs that you could rent, because nobody could afford one, but you could rent
Yeah.
one. There was a Skaggs Alpha Beta grocery store down the road from us that rented those things, and they were massive back then. They were like, it was like a case. It looked like you were getting an arms shipment. Like it was
Yep.
huge. Um, and then they had maybe 2 dozen VHS cassettes to choose from, like not much. And I remember everyone was so intrigued with this notion that you could watch a movie when you wanted to watch a movie. You didn't have to catch it on a rerun. You didn't have to, yeah. And so my folks, which they were always broke, so I don't know what possessed them to do this, but I think that it was just there were some things that they wanted us to see that they couldn't count on ever showing in a rerun. And the first VHS cassette that I ever watched was the Beatles movie, A Hard Day's Night.
Oh,
And I remember as a kid hearing that opening guitar riff and going right into that song with uh, John, George, and Ringo just running from fans down the street, and this whole opening montage of them being on the run while that song plays out. And I just remember being really captivated by that. And then as my dad had been a DJ, so I had 45s in a closet, and I would pull out all my dad's old records, and I listened to the Beatles like nonstop. I listened to other stuff too, Elvis, Dean Martin, the Monkees. I mean, I listened to a lot, but the Beatles were huge for me. And then when I got into college, even more so because I was paying more attention to music and lyrics, and I was able to. It wasn't just songs that I loved. It was like I was beginning to understand what they were as musicians and how sort of revolutionary they were. So
hmm.
I've always been a Beatles fan. So as soon as I think I lived here in the '90s, and a good friend of mine bought me a 3-pack VHS set that had Hard Day's Night, Help, and Magical Mystery Tour. Loved that. Watched them all. Wore those tapes out, and then by the time I could own them on DVD, I bought them on DVD. By the time I could own them on Blu-ray, I bought them on Blu-ray. So those are things that I can put on anytime and just like I know almost every line of dialogue. I love all the music. Um, I catch new things, new little bits of humor that maybe I didn't catch when I was younger that now I understand or whatever. But those are like I can just have those on and
Yeah.
not really pay attention, but still feel like I'm enjoying my time.
The first
So
time that so I was going to say the first time I know what you're talking about, the rental box. I want to say I'm pretty sure it was U-Haul where my dad rented one of those. It was like in a big orange case, rented the VCR for me. Like I
yeah,
had, I had like a little party or something, whatever. And one of I think we rented like three videos, VHS, but that was one of them was Rambo. And I watched
mm.
that thing over and over before we had to
Oh
take the
yeah.
VCR back.
There were so many movies of that era that were just must-watch things, and if you were of a certain age, then every time you went to a friend's house, you were watching that again, or every time you went. So I remember I must have seen Terminator, I don't know how many times.
Oh yes.
Yeah, the original Rambo, First Blood, I must have seen that dozens like all those movies, every kid I knew wanted to watch those, and so if they had a cable box or if they had a VCR, those movies were just always good. Big Trouble in Little China.
Oh yeah.
Just so many movies that I saw numerous times just because it was of the moment. Everybody was into
Right.
those things. So, yeah, as an adult, I don't know. I mean, I still love the Beatles movies, so I still can put those on. I still love old movies. Um, I've been the one modern movie that I kind of will watch anytime and I can kind of just put it on and laugh and do other things. Is Scott Pilgrim versus the World? I love that movie. Um, it is so funny to me, and I can't just all those actors are so on point with who their character is. So many little nuanced things. Heidi and I quote that movie nonstop. Um, just I don't even know. Like I can't even tell you all the things, but it's one of those things that anytime it's on, Heidi or I will stop and go, well, oh hey, just, just get lost and get. So anyway, that's my silly answer to that. But yeah, I thought I heard somebody ask the question. I was like, yeah, that's a great question. I wonder what my answer is, and then I realized I didn't know what your answer would be, so I wanted to hear that from you.
Well, then you've got those iconic movies that, like Goonies and Princess Bride. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, if those are on the TV, you'll even if it's not one of your favorites, you still have to kind of sit there for 15, 20 minutes and
Oh,
reminisce
sure.
those.
The what is it? The Romancing the Stone and Jewel of the Nile, those movies.
Yeah.
All the Indiana Jones movies. I mean, all those things were just such a huge part of. I mean, you live for that stuff too. I remember the very first movie I ever went to see by myself. Right, like normally you went, and my parents were not the parents who just turned you loose somewhere. If you were going to a movie, they were taking you to a movie, and it was something we all wanted to see. My granddad, likewise. I usually spent 2 or 3 weeks in the summer with my granddad, just hanging out, and he would take me to a movie, and it would be something that we both wanted to see. But when I was 11 years old, he decided I was old enough to go to the movie. My granddad decided I was old enough to go to the movie, so he gave me money for popcorn and a drink, and bought my ticket, and just turned me loose in the theater to go see Back to the Future.
Oh yeah.
And man, I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, Back to the Future. So I came out and was like, I got to find that soundtrack, and I've got to, like immediately I was just locked in. Yeah. So those are the days.
It's about,
Those are the days, man.
I guess I was about 12 years old. My neighbor, Mark Gephardt, he had a DeLorean. So
Ooh,
that was like crazy. I mean, we were like, it's
yeah,
the Back to the Future car.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy. I don't think I've ever, I don't think I've ever seen one up close. Maybe at a Comic-Con somewhere I walked past one or something, but I don't recall ever having been actually close to one. Yeah.
They weren't great cars.
Oh yeah, yeah. But they sure looked cool, didn't they? I just kicked
Yeah,
my
yeah.
camera. I was so excited. Yeah.
It was like a fancy Edsel or something modern day.
Yeah. All right. Well, I am excited to check out your discussion with Chad. So why don't we hop into that?
Let's jump in.
You are, well, state your full name for the record.
Yes, for the record, my name is Chad Carbonell.
Social security number. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where you from? Family, faith.
Originally from Michigan. Moved to, yeah, that's where here. I hear a lot of great people from that area. We moved to Kentucky 5.5 years ago. Stayed there for a couple of years. Found a house in Indiana 3 years ago. Bought it. We've been here for, like I said, 3 years. So, got a wife, got 3 kids. Faith is Christian. My wife, kids, everyone.
Well, I just wanted everybody to kind of be able to get to know you, since I already know you, since we are in a life group together. So that's always a good time. And we have our regular guy meetings, go out to lunch and gab and
Little dude time.
yeah, well, dude time. So when it comes to your faith, how long have you been a Christian?
Oh man. Probably pretty new, if I had to say. Tiffany's been a Christian for quite a bit longer.
Did you grow up in a Christian home?
I did not. The only real devout Christian in my family was, or is, she's still alive, is my grandmother. She taught Sunday school. She was pianist or organist. Would always, when we'd go up there, and she lives in the Upper Peninsula, Michigan, when we'd go up there, we'd always have her practicing her music. She'd bring us we'd have a stack of Sunday school drawings and papers and stuff that they did for the kids and stuff. So, but she was the only one my parents ever did. They never pushed that.
It's important to have the praying grandma. So bring the family home.
But
It's interesting.
But as far as for me, I realistically probably only the last couple of years.
So before that, would you have said you were atheist, agnostic? Just
I would have said I was a believer, but not a follower.
Okay.
I've always believed that it might not necessarily been Jesus, but there was some higher power at some
You knew God was there.
there was something that it was just it didn't just magically poof, here we are, everything. I don't necessarily believe in coincidences. It'd be too much to believe that everything how it happens is a coincidence.
Coincidence,
Yeah.
accident. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this, because it's something I've wrestled with, the idea of the positive effects of competition and the negative effects. So we'll get to that in a minute. But let's start out with your opinion. This is probably going to come out after the Super Bowl, I'm guessing, just to get all the editing done. Everything's been backed up.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, we'd like to have our predictions in so that people can say, "Wow, they're so smart. They knew." So who's going to win the Super Bowl? The Philadelphia Eagles or Taylor Swift and the Vegas officials? I'm sorry, the Kansas City Chiefs.
I really don't want Taylor Swift in Vegas to get a three-peat. Obviously, being from Michigan, Lions fan, that they've been knocked out already, so I don't have a skin in the game per se. But
Right.
I'd rather have the Eagles, to be honest. I like Saquon. I like A.J. Brown over there. Jalen Hurts getting, what would it be, his second one? Or did it be his first one? Eagles won what?
How many years ago was that? That might be his.
I think it's his first. I think that's Wentz and Foles and those guys are there. So
Thank you for the Blantons, by the way.
oh, not a problem. So and I think that the Eagles stack up well. I really do. If they can continue to give Saquon the ball, give him the ball, and have him run as efficiently as he has, that's going to be tough.
I'm nodding and agreeing, but I don't want anybody to get the impression that I know sports and follow. I like sports ball games. I've been involved in sports, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, I don't really follow anything too closely. But I was kind of looking into this, and I came across Rich Eisen, who is like an NFL commentator, had Bill Burr on his show, who is hilarious. If you can bleep out the expletives and stuff like that, but he was commenting on a lot of that stuff. It's worth. I'll show you the video later. But so what do you think about what these athletes get paid? So I did some looking into just to kind of catch myself up, and so Forbes said the top 50 athletes are raking in $3.88 billion in the last 12 months. And I thought that's a lot. So, and I was kind of surprised by this. The highest paid athlete is Cristiano Ronaldo, soccer. But then it made sense because he plays for the Saudi Pro League. So I guess are in Saudi Arabia, but he makes $260 million a year, or last year. LeBron James, somewhere around 47.6 million, which is still a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, that's shopping money there.
Even Patrick Mahomes' contract, it's a 10-year, but I want to say it was for like 430 million. So yeah, he's 43-ish million a year as well.
So then looking into like actors, actresses. So you got Adam Sandler at 73 million, which some of that is, what he's doing through deals with Netflix and stuff like that. So it's hard to zoom in on that. But Tom Cruise made 45 million. Margot Robbie made 59 million. So some of these top athletes are making in that top movie star range. So ZipRecruiter said that a research scientist can expect to make $107,500 between that and $173,000, which is still, that's good. But they're splitting atoms and putting robots in our homes and whatever they're doing. And USA Salary Information says that firefighters in San Jose, Sunnyvale, and Santa Clara, California, they're the top paid firefighters in the country, and they top the pay scale at $103,000, $460 a year. So, which is not awful, but when you're risking your life. So, and I'm not making any kind of values judgment on that, because obviously there's a disconnect between the value of an occupational contribution and somebody else's career that is specifically designed to rake in entertainment money globally.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it is an interestingly large gap.
Yeah.
So I don't know, what are your thoughts on what people get paid to?
When I was first like actually thinking about it, looking into it, I didn't take into account like first responders and things like that. And like you said, the substantial pay gap. I was just thinking, oh yeah, they do make a lot of money, but they're training year round and things like that. But when you put it into perspective with, like you said, people that are essentially risking their lives and stuff, not necessarily just for entertainment, it's like that doesn't quite seem right.
It's interesting. It's, again, I'm not like making any judgments saying these people get paid too much. I mean, they're bringing in entertainment dollars globally and all that. So, but it is kind of funny though to think that, somebody that's rescuing people is going to make that much less than somebody who's entertaining people.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just always thought that was interesting in like a high school context, maybe, how you have, if the budget gets cut, usually it's the band that gets cut first. So you have these people learning to, this amazing skill of being able to read music, translate that into sound, and then mix that in with the rest of a band, and then march while you're doing it. And it's like, okay, that's incredible. But then you've got like sports that kind of takes the forefront when it comes to capturing people's interest. So it's an interesting human dynamic, I guess. So why do you think we enjoy sports so much, from ancient Greco-Roman games to modern day sports?
For as far as like back in the day Romans, it was I did a little looking up. It's more religious festivals, or it was about their culture that mattered, their military prowess. How I've got the best athletes, I've got the strongest men, I've got this. So
Yeah.
and now day and age, it's a lot to just sheer enjoyment from a person, just getting the actual happiness and joy out of it. Sometimes it could be based off of pride in one city or community. A lot of the diehard, you've seen them in Philadelphia's and New York's, Skip Lee at the Knicks and things like that. Those guys are diehard. So when their team wins, it's a big deal for them. So
Well, yeah, you have that loyalty, like to the Lions, who disappointed us for a long time. They had a great year this year, or last year. Yeah, last year. Yeah, that's interesting, and I think human effort, excellence, overcoming odds is another reason I think that we enjoy sports, even if it's not somebody we're attached to. It's not our kids playing, it's not our college playing, whatever. You see a good game where people are fighting, digging it out, trying to overcome odds and stuff. It's like there's something inspiring about that.
once it gets to like bigger times, the Indy 500, the Super Bowls, and things like that, it's family camaraderie, a little time to relax and get together.
Yeah.
Things like that too.
Yeah. That's interesting. It does become kind of a family a staple, part of the culture of a family, to make sure you're rooting for the right team or you get in trouble.
I mean, even you'll see them in cities, they've got when their teams are in the playoffs and stuff, they were panning back to Philadelphia, and they had a whole, I don't know where it was at, but a facility, a room, a gym, something where thousands of people gathered to watch the game on a jumbo screen. Instead, they couldn't make it down there. So it's bringing a community, bringing a city together to watch a sports team.
That's an undertaking. Yeah. So what sports were you involved in?
When I played basketball, football, and baseball all 4 years when I was in high school. I ran track a little bit, and then my senior year, I wrestled.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a lot. So which one did you have a favorite sport?
I liked football and probably baseball the most out of the two. If I had a chance to go back, I probably would have wrestled all 4 years.
Okay.
I actually did enjoy it my senior year. I was just real late to the game, so
Yeah.
I did it. Wasn't great. We'll say that much. So
Oh yeah. I mean, some of those kids that have had 4 years or more, even junior high, to learn those techniques and moves and even just the feel of where things are going and to be ahead of the game. And I wrestled in 7th grade. And that was the only year I wrestled, but I enjoyed it and I was good at it. Took first in city. But I only had 2 moves, it was like, headlock, over the hip, takedown. That was my takedown move. And well, then of course on the mat there was grab the elbow if you're on bottom, and then if you're on top, collapse the arm and try to whatever. So, but I was large, I was strong, so I was able to do pretty well with very few techniques in the bag. So why did you end up enjoying? So did you enjoy football and baseball the most?
Out of all 4, even wrestling, yeah, it's just something that I enjoyed out of both. And I think that those were probably my better sports as well, so that made it a little more, a little biased, because I think I was naturally, I didn't put in a ton of work, but I was naturally good at it. My senior year when we played, when they put you in like all stars, first conference, second conference, first team all conference, second team all conference, they had to they never had it before. They had to create a utility position because I had pitched enough games to qualify for being in the running. I caught enough games to be qualified in the running. I played short, I played first, I played second, and I played center field. So they put me in as a first team all conference utility, and they create the position because they're like, he's qualified enough, but I didn't have enough stats in any single position. It was 5 games at short, 6 in center, 6 games pitching, 5 games behind the dish.
Split up your stations there. I was decent at baseball. Little league, and I could hit. That was my thing. I loved to get up to the plate and just anticipate a pitch and just lay into it. Love to watch that thing fly. But when it came to everything else, I don't think I had much skill because I was always in right field. I don't think I was a very focused athlete. But it was good. I played right field, catcher, and that was pretty much my baseball. I did enjoy it though. Yeah. Was it the game for you? Did you enjoy the play, or was it a mixture of crowd reaction, the team dynamics, or?
I think all of it was a combination for sure. Our school was smaller, so we didn't have the greatest of teams, but everyone that was on there, you're friends with and stuff. So it was in the dugout, we're hooting and hollering and laughing. We're having fun out on the field too. Our coaches made it extremely fun, and it was serious. We were having fun though. They made it a point like, hey, this is just a game. Have fun and enjoy it. So that made it. Football, it was the same thing. Our team was not good. Our coaches were not enthralled by what we were doing on the field, so it wasn't. I like the hitting, I like the aspect, I like being on the field for football, but it wasn't quite as enjoyable as it was when we transitioned to baseball.
Yeah, so can we say that winning is also at least part of? I mean, you can have fun even if you're not a winning team. You can still enjoy the game, but if you're never winning, could we say then that it would be more enjoyable if you're able to see the fruits of your labor and your injuries? And
at some point, if you're continually losing and losing and losing, it's gonna diminish, the value of playing. You can't constantly lose and I had fun. It is enjoyable. It makes you a little more happy, a little more excited when you do win or finally win. So it definitely has an aspect to it that you like to enjoy.
Definitely. So what are some of your most positive moments on the field or on the court? Most
of them would have been on the field. It was honestly, it it wasn't really a lot of it during the game. It was in between games or at tournaments. Like I said, our coaches were just great. Even when we were losing, I remember a time we were getting beat at a tournament. We weren't invited to the tournament because it was obviously it was an invite only, but a team had dropped out. So they called us last minute and said, "Hey, do you want to come to this tournament?" And we're like, "Yeah, we'll show up." So it was a lot of high quality baseball teams in this, and we were not at that level. So we were getting
Just to be there, that's what they get.
we're getting pummeled, and our coaches, between I think we went 0-5 or 0-6 for the tournament for the weekend. And after I think like our third loss, our coach pulls aside, and he's kind of yelling at us, getting into us. He's like, "This is just a circus to you guys, isn't it?" One of our guys was behind him, juggling 3 balls, and we're not trying to laugh, but our coach yelling. He turns around, he goes, "Point proven," and just walks up. And his name was Andrew. Andrew was like, "What?" And then he called all 3 balls. He was just, we were just like, "Yeah, that's our team in a nutshell. What are you gonna do?" And that's something I will. And he said a few other choice words in there, but it was just point proven. Walked off. I don't even think he coached the next game. I think our assistant coach had to. He finally came back for the last 1 or 2 games. But yeah, he was not at it with us.
Yeah. Yeah, I was never. I mean, I was good at the wrestling. I was fast. I mean, that was my thing. And for a large person, I don't know how many times I heard people say, "Wow, for a fat kid, you can really run like fast."
You're a big man.
I was on a speed skating team at one point, and yeah, and I mean, on straightaways, I was making progress, but then in the corners, it was kind of like inertia and physics sort of took over, and we kind of fall back and make up for it on the straightaway. But yeah, I wasn't very good at any sports. I do remember like one time feeling pretty good about myself. I was playing on a city league. I was 12 years old playing football. And so one of the drills we did was, you may have done those too, where you have 2 guys and you have one guy hitting 2 guys.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like a kind of like maybe hitting a sled or something. So you're not supposed to be able to push the 2 guys back, but you're supposed to, I don't know what the drill was for it as I think about it now, actually. But I was like one of the few people on the team where I was actually pushing 2, which were smaller than me, but I was pushing these 2 kids back. I just felt like, yeah, we are Sparta. I mean, it was just a great for me. But then we had this kid named Mulvihill on the team, and he was unusually large for his age. And I think he might have been 13, but just very large. So I took my confidence. I lined up against him. I guess he was playing center, whatever he was playing. We ran into each other. And all I remember was seeing the sky, the ground, the sky, the ground. And then I was on the ground trying to catch my breath. So every victorious moment has something to take the wind out of your sails, right?
Yeah. I remember playing in a game. They threw a hitch to her wide receiver. I was playing cornerback, and I read it, anticipated, and right as he catches it, I hit him. And I know we hit helmet to helmet. I blacked out. I hit down. And as I'm waking up, I just hear the crowd's erupting, and I thought we were at home. It knocked me almost senseless. I thought we were home. It was a away game. I hear the crowd erupting. I'm like, oh man, I smoked that guy. I get up and I'm looking around for him. I'm like looking at the ground, and the crowd's still roaring. I'm like, where's he at? I turned. He's celebrating in the end zone. He shrugged it off as I was limp on the ground, and then ran all the way down the field to score.
What is that guy? Like a Nephilim guy or something, right? Like he was just, geez, that's scary. So beyond even sports, what does unhealthy competition look like? Sports, marriage, business, sibling rivalries. What does it look like when there's unhealthy competition? How do we define that?
I came across a few. Seemed a lot of mine were, or a lot of my, when I did a little research looking at, were based off of like at works, hostile work environments.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could take this one and translate it to anything, but unrealistic expectations. You're seeing, so I got to be like them, or I should be doing this, or why can't I do this? And obviously, and with that, it's the negative self-image.
Interesting.
And then at the height of it would be your self-worth, or your self-worth is now then tied to winning. You know, if you're not winning, then you must not be amounting to anything, or you must not be doing something right.
Do you think the sports industry kind of helps that along too by idolizing certain players and victories and things like that? Or
It always is. Anytime any MVPs or things like that, and you could look back on, you might find some instances, but I would say probably 75, 80%. It's, the winning team, the winning person, the winning this gets an MVP or an extra trophy or an extra bonus. It's very rarely that, oh, the loser had a good game, we'll give him the MVP. It's always tied to whatever team's winning usually.
yeah.
There's been instances, especially in in NBA, a majority of the time, if you're an MVP, your team's doing well. They might not necessarily win it all, but you're not scoring 70 points on a 10-40 team. You're in the playoffs, you're in the hunt, things like that. So
Playoffs. Sorry, I had to do that every time I hear playoffs. I was thinking about Ohio State and Michigan State, that rivalry up there, and that's fun. I mean, I wouldn't call that like any kind of unhealthy, even though people do get heated.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad is from Ohio, but lives in Michigan and is an Ohio State fan, has a flag flying off of his front door and wears the State t-shirts everywhere he goes. And it starts conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that's fun. Yeah, like, I don't know, who was it that stomped on the other guy's knee a few years back? It was I don't even remember who was playing. I just remember thinking, man, that was stinky. Maybe it was just a couple years ago.
I can't remember. I know, unfortunately, for the Lions, I liked them, but Ndamukong Suh was relatively notorious for, you could almost say, underhanded or shady things. It might have been something that he had done, to be honest. But
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I guess we could kind of even transfer that over from sports into things that are like more important than just that, like marriage. The idea that I have to win this argument against my wife, or she has to win this argument against me. It's like, it's competitive in that sense. And it's not healthy. I mean, it would be healthy not to have arguments, but if they don't go the right direction after the argument starts, then it becomes unhealthy. But, obviously if your wife or, whatever brings something up to you that she knows that you care about, that matters to you, but you don't respond, you just say, yeah, whatever. Then it's kind of like saying, I really don't care about your opinion, whatever. So there, at some level we have to argue.
Yeah.
We have to like come back and say, no, that does matter to me. And I disagree with you. And this is why I disagree. I'm going to go off on a little rant here, but I was watching Jordan Peterson having this really interesting conversation with Sean Ryan. Sorry, there we go. So Jordan Peterson was on Sean Ryan, and they were talking about well, it's kind of irrelevant what they were talking about. It was interesting because it was like this guy who was an operator, a Navy SEAL, and had just a traumatic thing happen where he ended up shooting a couple of kids. And I think I can't say that if we put this on YouTube, so I'll have to edit that part out. But he ended up directly causing the demise of a couple kids. And it was well within what you would consider to be your duty during these operations. It was something that, and these weren't clearly identified as kids, but later on it was like, those were kids.
Yeah.
And this guy was just distraught. Like 8 years later, still wrestling through the way he sees himself and whatever. But anyways, the thing that was interesting to me about that was Jordan Peterson was talking about the idea of being wrong and what that means to look into yourself and what it costs you to admit that you're wrong about the way you're seeing something, or about somebody brings something to you and, argues with you, let's say, competes with you over an idea. Then he even brought this into it, like the marriage situation. He kind of extrapolated on that and said, if you're having an argument with your spouse or whatever, and then they bring something to you, it's like we don't want to lose, partially because we know what it costs to be wrong. That now you have to go back and look at why you were wrong and figure that out. And that can be work. And then you have to let that part of yourself go. And that's, in a sense, it is a dying to self in a biblical sense like that. It's kind of like death, because you're going to lose a part of yourself that maybe you had spent years thinking was one of the cooler parts of who I am, and maybe even contributed to building that part of that your person. And now you have to say this is wrong, and now I have to let that go, and how painful that is. So I want to jump off of that and take it even further. And I'm sure Jordan Peterson probably wants, I'll give him a minute to grab his notebook because you don't want to write this down. But this is something I thought about before too. Like, you'll hear people say things like, let's not talk about sports, or let's not talk about politics, religion, and sports comes in there too. And I think the reason that those things hit so deep is because you can get very deeply into a value system without even realizing it. So just for instance, let's say just fictitious teams, let's say you're for the Chicago Bears, which I don't know why anybody would be, but let's just say you were. Lydell watches this, my friend. He's going to hate that. Sorry, Lydell. But anyways, let's just say you're for the Chicago Bears and you're for a particular quarterback and a particular coach during whatever era. And let's just say that growing up, you and your dad and your grandpa and your family and people sat around, and your dad loved the team, loved the game, and lauded the coach, and greatest coach ever. And, this quarterback, he's just fantastic and whatever. And let's say just in a conversation, we're having, and I insensitively say something like, oh, that team sucks. I can't believe anybody likes that team. I mean, you just have to be stupid if you think that quarterback is any good. And, he's overrated. And the only reason he's completing any passes is because of, whatever running back. I have just insulted your grandfather, your father, their wisdom, their understanding of the game, your understanding of the game. So it gets very personal, very deep. And so I think that is one of the reasons that anything, I mean, whether it's sports or, business acumen, whatever, I think we can get so caught up in, the deeper fabric woven into things that do have meaning without recognizing that it's just a game. It's just a political person that's going to be out in 4 years. Let's take a breath. And not that things don't matter. Obviously things do matter, but I think some things are way more important, especially as a Christian. Let me see where I'm at. I've got more questions, and I don't want to keep you all night. And I know your family's going to come home soon, and they're not going to want to try to be quiet and, whatever. Let's see. Well, I'll edit out this part. This is getting long. Yeah, we did that. Yep. Okay, so what does healthy competition look like, and what positive results do we get from healthy competition?
So I did it a couple of ways, and I guess you could tie them both together. Having like a mentor or someone that you look up to, I think you could tie into healthy competition, because then you can strive to be like them, or try to obtain without it being something that you're hyper focused on or fixated on. For instance, with the group, you, Dale, Jeff are all vastly more knowledgeable, vastly more tuned with the Bible and being spiritual, and a lot of that comes with following for so long. So it's something as for me that I can look up to and say, okay, well, this is what, and hopefully in 10, 15 years, that's what I hope to be at. That's where I want to be at as far in with religious sound up. Yeah. Or even farther, but it gives me a good benchmark. Just something, this is what I want to get to, and hopefully, like you said. So I mean, you could call it competition. You know, I'm not competing to be better, but it gives me something to look forward to. Okay, I can obtain this. This is something I can get. I can
Yeah,
get.
well, maybe we
get
could
to-
say that like healthy competition builds community, builds character and vision for what I want to be. And
gives you motivation. Like, yeah, I can do that.
yeah, I think those are great points. Yeah, like even I wrote down a couple things like how to learning how to lose and learning how to win.
Mhm.
I think that's important. I think it's real easy to, you know, like you were saying, like building a negative self-worth or value system if you're losing and thinking that I'm somehow worth more if I'm winning. But to be able to see ourselves through the framework of what God says.
Yeah.
I heard one time, I thought this was very wise, thought about it a lot of times, but somebody said that we're not who we think we are. We're not who others think we are. We are what we think others think of us, which is unhealthy. I like to look at it that way, obviously, because, you know, we're all, you know, especially like you see teenagers, you know, kids in high school and stuff like that. That is such a rough time. And there's so much pressure. And if you're seeing yourself in the mirror as you think other people see you, then you're probably seeing all of your, you know, worst
Your fault.
physical, you know, whatever. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not handsome enough, whatever it is. And it's like, no, you need to drop back and see how God sees you, because you are amazing and precious, fearfully and wonderfully made. So I thought we're kind of coming to the end of this here. So I don't know if you ever watch Casual Geographic on the YouTubes.
Ooh, I don't think I have.
It's funny. It's got a little bit of language in it, but it's like really educational. You like get to learn about these animals and stuff like that. But the guy's just cutting these hilarious lines and jokes and stuff as he's going through. And anyways, I was watching one. I thought it was really interesting that even animals play and compete, not just for training to hunt. They actually play and compete for enjoyment. And they were just showing how, you know, animals, even as they're aging and they already know how to hunt, and it looks like sometimes it looks like they're fighting, but the like lions, bears, and wolves have these, and a lot of other animals too, I guess, but he mentioned those specifically, will have this different kind of head movement that invites sparring.
Oh, yeah.
So the other animals, like, okay, we're playing, but they're growling and, you know, they're you know, whatever. But it's like social. It's a social thing, and I thought that was interesting. And one of the clips they showed was these otters like messing with this crocodile. So they're up on a rock and they like, you know, and the crocodile comes out and they scurry off. And then one of the otters slipped on the rock and ended up right in the crocodile's. And the crocodile just kind of like released him. Like, that's my buddy. So we play. And then he showed like ravens making friends with wolves. So I didn't know that. It's specifically ravens will make friends with these wolves, and they'll pick at the wolves. They'll play with them, like, you know, swoop down and nip at their tail and stuff like that, and get the wolf to kind of like chase them. And the wolf's not like trying to kill them. They're like actually playing. It's the weird, crazy. And then you got dolphins that enjoy biting down on a puffer fish because that neurotoxin makes them high. No way. Yeah, they've actually got underwater video of dolphins passing the puffer fish. It is wild. So I don't know. I don't know why I threw that in, because but anyway, it's not competitive. But little animal fun facts, I guess. So that brings me to the end of my questions. Anything else that you want to add or talk about, feel free.
I don't think so.
Okay, well then I have one more event, and I have a gift.
Ooh.
A dodo gift. And thank you for showing up on the dodo channel here.
Oh, no. Yeah.
You're going to be an official dodo. So here is a nice bullet mug with a little bit of jerky.
Love some jerky.
But first you have to win it.
Ooh.
So here is, I call this segment Try to put some echo in this. The cultural octagon. So what it is basically a versus. This versus that. So you can explore a couple of topics and see which thing you think is better. And if you get them right, then you win. There is no wrong answer. So
that's a lot of pressure.
okay. Joe Montana versus Tom Brady.
Tom Brady.
Okay. You got the first one right. Even if I disagree, there's no wrong answer. Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul.
Yeah. Even at 55, Mike Tyson. I'll take him at 65.
Correct. Family Guy versus The Simpsons.
Oh.
They're both raunchy.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I'm just admitting that he's watched it is just sinful right there.
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna have to go to Catholic confessional.
Yes, that for sure. There's at least like 4 Hail Marys I'm gonna have to do. I have to go Family Guy. So my dad watched a lot of, other than like Star Trek, that might be one of his like go-to.
Old Star Trek.
Yeah, with like Jean-Luc Picard. The bald one.
Oh, well, when I say old one, I mean William Shatner. But
Okay, he watched Wade. He liked. I can't remember that actor's name. Is it Jean-Luc?
oh
No, that's who he played, was Picard in. What was that? He played
yeah, I know who you're talking
Professor X as well.
Yeah.
X-Men.
about. Jean-Luc Picard? No, Picard was his.
I think it's a space name, yeah. But he other than that, he watched Sly Simpson. So
Okay.
being, running around the house and terrorizing.
I used to, when our kids were still, younger and they're, I think Harmony was probably like, 9 or something like that. Maybe the boys were a little older, and there was such good humor mixed in with the raunchy stuff. So I would tell Shani, I would like, okay, let's just watch until first thing, nasty thing that he says, turn it off. I don't think we ever got like 20 seconds into the show. It was just like, oh man.
Yeah, you couldn't be in there. You couldn't go with Family Guy after you got through the initial like startup of the thing. You'd be like, all right, well, turn it off.
Yep. Okay, last one. This is going to be a tough one because you're going to have to put some pieces together, right? Wayne Gretzky versus Adam Sandler in golf and hockey.
Ooh. Well, obviously Wayne and this hockey's a no-brainer, but
This would be Happy Gilmore.
yeah,
It kind of gets tough. I mean, if you really start thinking about it, because golf, I mean, he's going to dominate Gretzky.
yeah. I've never seen obviously Gretzky golf, and you get obviously from movies, you get a little bit of both from Happy Gilmore and
So
where does he play? What movies he play hockey? Anger Management. That's one where he's in the.
well, he's a hockey player as Happy Gilmore, but
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, it's because he was in the batting cage, just taking. What do you do? Strengthen for next season, taking fastballs to the chest.
well, and then so you would assume that Gretzky would just absolutely dominate him on the ice, obviously in hockey. But if you have to remember though that Happy Gilmore did get the first penalty for trying to stab somebody with a.
Oh my goodness! Still, I still have to go Wayne Gretzky.
Mm-hmm. Got on. You gotta, yeah.
At least it might be a 50-50 in golf, if nothing else.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chad,
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
for being on our podcast. So yeah, this was Chad Carbonell. Did I say that right?
So, how I normally tell people, just the atom or the element carbon with an O. Carbon.
Carbonell. All right. I just want to put some kind of like twist on it. Cardano. Why not?
And everyone thinks it's French. I've had or Italian. It's French and German.
All right. Well, this concludes our interview. Yeah. So it was a really good conversation. We covered some ground. What's interesting to me
And like we talked about, I've wrestled with this whole competitiveness thing, in different contexts. So,
So you're a human,
you've
is what
got
you're saying.
I'm a mostly.
Okay.
I mean, so you've got this kind of idolatry thing that can happen in any kind of competitiveness, but you can really specifically see it easily in sports where you have people making bazillions of dollars and they're bouncing a ball. And I'm not trying to belittle you know the skill that it takes to be at a professional level or anything like that, but and kids will have these posters on their walls of their sports heroes, and sometimes those sports heroes do not have a good personality, let's say. uh
Sure.
some of the
Key to
things that they
play.
do, yeah, and it's like, these people are being uplifted for something, and I'm going, gosh, that's not real healthy. And
Right.
and then you have, the problem with over competitiveness. Like, for somebody to win, that means somebody else loses. And it's like trying to reconcile that with understanding, like, as a Christian, understanding the gospel and how we're supposed to consider others' needs above our own. So it's just been kind of like a thing where I'm, wrestle with that whole idea of, when is it okay to compete? When is it okay to win and beat
Right.
somebody else? When is it okay to take the ball away from somebody and, compete at some kind of level? Or if you want to talk about, in a business format, like, when is it okay to succeed at business when you're taking market share away from somebody else? That kind of thing. It's like, so there's been this wrestling. I had this friend when I lived in Alabama, Rodney, and it's interesting. He was raised in a real strict church, and his parents would not let him go to football games at the high school, and
Huh.
he was obviously not allowed to play football. In Alabama, everything is football. You live, eat, and breathe, high school and college football. Um, so we were talking about it one day, and I was like, but that it's not evil or against God to go to a football game, right? And he's like, well, yeah, I know that, but there's still something inside of me that won't let me enjoy that. I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of like another extreme that's not healthy. Um,
Right.
so yeah, just so I kind of came into this episode with questions, more than answers. I didn't really have answers, and I was kind of fretting a little bit, about it, because um I'm like, all right, well, I should be able to come to some conclusions here. But I mean, I'd talked to I'd talked to Chad, we'd talked to John, and um, there's the obvious things that are positive about competition, like, character building, learning how to work together as a team for a common goal, that kind of a thing. But it just seemed to me like the negatives seem to just outweigh the positives. And I'm like, all right, well, I don't want to be a negative person on this, come out of this episode going, well, there it is. Competition is bad. you know,
uh,
so next time you're watching sports, just know that God is looking down and saying, you horrible people.
that's right.
So I
Stop
didn't.
enjoying your day.
Yeah, so I was like, I was really like open to trying to understand. So this was kind of a really good learning thing for me. So
It's interesting because you know I think we tend to think of competition in that sort of team sense, right? Or a one-on-one trying to outdo one another kind of thing. And I sometimes get kind of twisted up in my own head because of my competitiveness with myself and trying to prove to myself that I can do a thing. And sometimes that gets obsessive, that like I w- and I'm the world's where, most creative people are their own worst critics anyway. That tends to be true of most people that I've met that are in that space. And so I'll write a book and spend a long time working on making it the best I can get it before I publish it, before it hits the shelves. And then maybe 2, 3 weeks in, I'll be talking about that same book that I was so proud of 3 weeks ago. And, either somebody will mention something and I'll go back to reread a section or to do whatever because of a conversation that happened. And I'll see something. I'm like, oh, I could have done that better. And then it begins this thing in my head where I start wanting to go back and fix things and manage things to make them better, because now I'm embarrassed by this thing I was super proud of 3 weeks ago. That phrase, if I would have said this instead, it would have tied better into that other thing. And I can eat myself up with that stuff. And
Yeah.
it's not a bad thing to want to compete with yourself in the sense of getting better all the time, right? We should all grow. We should all be challenged by things. But if that sense of competition starts to eat away at your self-worth or your, ability to function, like if you get so wrapped up in, and I fight, I'm telling you, I fight this sometimes, that I get so wrapped up in wanting to do something well that I just don't do anything. Like right now we're in a season of my wife traveling a lot, and I've got some editing stuff that's sitting on the table that, back from the editor, that all I need to do is go through and approve changes on. And because I'm constantly running and doing things and taking care of things around the house and taking care of the kids and stuff while my wife's away, the space in my brain that I normally have for that is just not there like it normally is. And so I've been afraid to tackle it. I literally have not trusted my brain to
Yeah.
deal with those edits, because I know myself, and I know that if something slips past me, I'm gonna be really upset with myself later. So I'm just in this place of not doing anything. And I'm like, well, that's not good either. I need to occupy myself. So I started working on some other things, but I just kind of had to set that aside because, I was just, I was so yeah, yeah. I just was eaten up with it. And I think it's good to recognize that about yourself and kind of leave that at the cross and be like, God, this is not how you want me to feel about myself or this situation. Like, I'm just going to leave this with you. It helps to have friends to talk to. It helps that, but you know, it's it can start in a good way. Like, I'm never competing with other writers I know. Like, I'm always happy when they're succeeding and doing big things. I'm competing with me, and I get really bogged down in that sometimes. And so even if you're not in a team, even if you're not in a one-on-one competition with somebody else, some of those negative things can still get at you, even if you're just competing with yourself and your own idea of what you need to be. It can happen.
Well, here's what I learned. Here's what I came away with, and it's fascinating to me. It's actually exciting. Um, I didn't think I was going to find like a good answer. I figured I would just come to some kind of a stalemate with conflicting ideas, and you just got to kind of navigate your way through and try to stay positive, whatever. But I actually got a really good answer. So um through these conversations and through digging into this stuff, what I recognized was that if you are if you are alive and breathing air, then you are competing. Everything that we do in life is competing, whether it's competing with myself to get out of bed, or whatever ideas, artistic expression, whatever. We're all competing. Like, for example, Monet. If Monet had been the first painter and had discovered some berries and squished them around and finger painted on a rock, we would never have Monet's work. We would never have the art
Yeah.
that he produced, because he was challenged by other people. And
Yeah.
uh,
Well, and you and I talked about at the beginning, at the top of the episode, we were talking about movies, and I mentioned the Beatles and my love of the Beatles. they admit that they would not have been the songwriting powerhouse that they were, that Lennon McCartney songwriting team, if it hadn't been for competition. That Paul was always trying to impress John, and John was always trying to do better than Paul, because Paul would bring him, some great song, and John would be like, I got to do better than that. And it led to them hitting new heights because
Exactly.
they wanted to do better. They're like, oh, that was great. Now I got to really do something,
And that's it. That's a better example. Let's go with that, because the Beatles didn't invent music. They didn't invent harmony. And
Right.
so they were playing off of something else, and they also didn't invent the guitar or the drums. So they were using tools,
Right.
things that were already there. So they stepped into an arena, and here's kind of where I saw it going, is that, you know, the reason that we're always going to be competing, whether it's in the realm of ideas or business or art or science or music, the reason we're going to end up competing is directly related to the idea of excellence. Anything where you're trying to achieve a standard of excellence, you are competing with people that have gone before you, people that are coming after you, people in your sphere of influence. So even if you're competing with yourself, like with your writing, um, if nobody was ever going to read that, and it was just you stranded on an island with, a pencil and paper, the standard of excellence would be different. Because you would know how you would want things to read correctly, and you might not even ever write it down because the story is in your head. So it's like, even though you're not necessarily, or we're not necessarily trying to beat somebody else and, outdo somebody else, when you're pursuing that excellence, you are competing internally and externally against things that are already there, and against negative voices inside of you, against negative criticism outside of you, the expectations of people that expect excellence from you, to not disappoint them. So
Right.
it's a competitiveness. And so, but here's what I found as the payoff in all of these things: it creates community. So whenever we compete, we should be lifting up a standard. We should be lifting up community. We should be lifting up the game, whatever that is. And I mean, you look at, a silly game, and again, I'm not disparaging a sport, but if I remember correctly, I learned in school that basketball was actually started by a teacher that hung like a vegetable basket or something up, and you throw the ball in it, and that was how basketball got started. So a silly game that got started like that has turned into arenas packed with people,
Yeah.
uh, and people
It's an
selling
Olympic
hot
sport.
dogs. Yeah, and then, one of the things that Chad brought up, I thought that was very interesting, is how, for him growing up and watching sports on TV and stuff, it was a family thing. You got together with the family. This was like, so it's community, it's connection with people, it's a drive for excellence. And then, looking at that through that lens, and applying that to what I know of my Christian faith, looking at the Bible, and, the things that Paul said and the things that Jesus did. Jesus was constantly competing in the arena of ideas, constantly trying to help people to get a hold of truth, and,
Mm.
taking down Pharisees' arguments, and Paul. I mean, these guys, Christ and his apostles were incredibly competitive. Like, they get thrown in jail and beaten, and, they let them out and say, "Don't do that again." They're like, "Okay, here we go. Let's do it again."
Yeah. One more time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was really excited at finding that, and going, you know what, that's competition is a positive thing. And,
Yeah.
there's obviously negative things that can grow out of that, like undue worship of people, or
Sure.
the sport itself, or, having an inflated ego, and an unrealistic impression of your skills and who you are, and spiking the ball in the end zone and dancing on somebody else's loss, and that kind of a
Yeah.
thing. Those are all negative negative parts of the sport. Sometimes it's fun to watch, but it's like,
Right.
you know so but some of those things are embedded in the sport, like hockey. My, John Sweetland, I know one time when we were talking about sports and stuff, he said, yeah, I went to the fights and a hockey game broke out. It's like, yeah, that's kind of how it rolls, isn't it? uh so you kind of have expectations that you're going to have some things that you might call, bad examples, poor sportsmanship, things like that. But
Sure.
and hopefully, in business and in relationships, we don't bring those negative things in, like competing with my wife in an argument to be right. I have to win this argument. I have to be right. That that's a negative competitiveness. Like, yeah, do you want to be right, or do
Yeah.
you want to be happy?
Well, and I think that's why it's important for us as believers to have a different approach to, like you said, we're in a competition whether we want to be or not. Even if we're just talking about, you know, um, we've got our next show coming up will be my discussion with Nathaniel Hilmer, and that's something to look forward to if you're listening now. But um,
Yeah.
in that discussion, he talks about the that the world is always giving its ideas. The world is always talking. The world is always in your kid's ear. The church has to keep talking. The church has to keep responding to culture and having a biblical answer to the need and the brokenness around us. And I think likewise, when you're talking about competition, that, yeah, there are some negatives because we're broken people who tend to lean into our flesh and tend to, um, easily fall away from what we know scripture is calling us to be. But that's why it's important for believers in whatever space they're in, whether we're talking about a day job or we're talking about sports or we're talking about writing or we're talking about whatever, that in whatever competition you find yourself in, that you comport yourself as someone with the grace of God, someone who has been forgiven much, someone who loves freely, that to be in those spaces and bring something new to the table. And that's, you saying Jesus was always competing, right, with the culture around him, with the beliefs of the age and all of those things, the philosophies that were all around him. Same thing with Paul and the idolatry and other things around it, that we're competing with those things, but how you do it matters. Um, Jesus was not Jesus was not preaching a populist message of, hey, everybody do what you want, it's fine, live how, live free, God loves you no matter how you live. He was not doing that. He was calling people to repent. It was countercultural, and yet people still came to him in droves. And I think that, if we are in these competitive spaces, whatever those look like in our lives, but we are keeping our eyes focused on the Savior and not sinking into the waves. I think the world will be better for it. The church will be better for it, and we as individuals will be better for it because it allows more room for the Holy Spirit to have His way in our lives.
Yeah. And there's these beautiful moments in sports too. I mean, you can find a lot of these moments like on YouTube, where somebody's running a race and they're winning, and somebody stumbles and falls, and they'll stop, go back and help somebody up, that kind of a thing.
Sure.
Just beautiful moments like that where there is like just a grace and a mercy and a something that goes beyond I have to win, and it's
Right.
like,
Almost as if winning isn't everything.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it was a very good conversations.
That's good. Well, I'm sorry I missed it, especially Chad's portion of it. Sorry I didn't get to meet John as well. Hopefully, for those of you listening, we are our preference is always for Rob and I to be in the same place talking to our guests and doing that. But we've found that our schedules are so all over the place that there will be times when I'll have to sit down with someone, or Rob will have to sit down with someone, and then we'll just have to catch up and discuss it afterwards. But that's all in our attempt to bring you the best show that we can. So bear with us while we're working out the kinks in this thing. We're constantly trying new things and discussing how we could
If
streamline
I'm not
things.
advising, if I'm not advising Trump, I'm flying up with Elon and one of the
Yeah.
ships. There's
You've
just
got
there's
a
always
busy,
something going on. So
yeah,
it's pretty busy.
you've got a busy imagination. Yeah.
Yeah, legend in my own mind.
That's right. All right. Well, folks, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be right back with Rob's final thought.
Today's show is brought to you by Dr. Hermeneutic of Hermeneutics Language Center. Are you struggling with context? Is your meaning meandering? Dr. Hermeneutic and his team of grammatists and historians will help the fact in your faction and help you relish your religion. Call 555-266-8398. That's 555-CONTEXT. Call today. Warning, exegesis is a separate discipline and Hermeneutics Language Center bears no responsibility for sloppy interpretations or the rotten state of your mortal soul.
And lastly, with today's final thought, my friend and colleague, Rob Sharp.
Eric Liddell, a Scottish Olympic runner, missionary, and focal point of the 1981 movie Chariots of Fire, famously said, "When I run, I feel God's pleasure." I think that's a good benchmark for when you're doing it right. Competing with the right spirit. The fact is, if you are alive and breathing air, you are competing. It's not a choice. It's part of life. We compete the moment we open our eyes in the morning. Some days we'd rather stay in bed, but we have bills and responsibilities, so we overcome and we go to work. We compete with bad attitudes towards our job, compensation, colleagues, even the boss. We compete with complacency to work half-hearted, and we also compete to perform at a level that earns us raises. We compete for our family, for ideas. We compete when we vote. The difference is how and why and what we are competing for. Competitiveness should elevate excellence, elevate the creative, and create community. The way that we compete should embody the character and virtue that we value in our story characters: loyalty, bravery, compassion, diligence, self-sacrifice. Imagine living in a community where everyone was for everyone else, everyone encouraging the best in everyone else, coming to aid the injured, protecting each other, watching each other's backs. If we compete for our own glory, our own benefit, then we sit alone with our trophies. I believe that these positive characteristics of competitiveness are most clearly seen in the person of Jesus. He left it all on the field. He entered the arena of ideas regularly to open the eyes and the ears of mankind to a kingdom and a salvation that was and is being offered to everyone, every tribe, tongue, and nation. He fought against bad ideas that lead to jealousy, anger, hatred, loneliness, chaos, and ultimately to death and separation from everything that is good. He didn't compete for himself. He never gave up. He courageously spoke the truth that ran upstream of the custom of Jewish leadership and Roman authorities. Jesus loved his enemies. He loves even the worst of us, the lowliest of us. He wasn't afraid to turn over the money changers' tables in the temple and drive them out with a whip. But even on the cross, Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." Some might say that Jesus lost the big game. He was killed. It might look like he failed, that he was unable to change humanity, and the resurrection was just a myth. But Jesus' death and resurrection was a touchdown to win the game. If Jesus hadn't died, then we would still owe the debt for our sin. And if he hadn't risen, then we would have no hope for eternity. Jesus is our champion and our example of how to live, love, and compete. We hope that this episode was beneficial to someone listening and watching. Until next time, may the peace and the love of God win in our hearts and in our minds.